Right now, contact centre leaders across New Zealand are under pressure to do more with less. Tighter budgets, rising channel complexity, AI expectations, and customers who simply won't tolerate friction. But here's the real question. Are your processes actually helping you deliver better customer experiences or quietly holding you back? In this episode, we have Richard Winterburn representing CCNNZ, Kelly Brickley from COPC, and Ramon Szeitszam from Spark as they unpack the process insights from the 2025 CCNZ Industry Research Report. What's improving, what's slipping, and where smart operators are focusing next. If you're serious about lifting performance without burning out your people, this conversation is for you. Welcome to the Kiwi CX Collective podcast from CCNNZ.
Hi, and thanks for joining us. My name is Richard Winterburn, and I'm representing CCNNZ today. We're going to be discussing the COPC Industry Research Report that was completed last year. Incidentally, there's another one coming out shortly, so watch out for the invitation to take part in that. I'm luckily joined by Kelly Brickley and Ramon Szeitszam, both of whom have had an incredible amount of years in the industry and have a huge amount of knowledge. Kelly is a committee member with CCNNZ and principal consultant at COPC. She's got over 30 years of experience in the contact centre industry and started as an agent for telecom back in 1990. Unbelievable. There must be a spelling mistake in there or a typo something, Kelly. Her career spanned leadership roles in operations management, deployment of technology tools, and consultancy aimed at improving contact centre performance. Having spent 10 years in the USA developing channel sales programs and training for ICMI, she's worked with major organisations like the Bank of America and IBM. On returning to New Zealand, Kelly's run her own consulting business before taking on leadership roles in both government and private sector contact centres, and she's currently serving as principal consultant for COPC here in New Zealand. Ramon is head of voice and collaboration at Spark, New Zealand, where he leads voice and collaboration strategy for New Zealand's largest telco. Ramon brings with him a rare perspective to customer experience because he's worked both sides of the fence, a little like Kelly, but worked both sides of the fence. From pre-sales solutions engineering at Interactive Intelligence through consulting and sales leadership at QPC in Australia, his current role at Spark, he's spent over a decade helping organisations connect technology decisions to real customer outcomes. And it's that blend of technological depth and practical CX understanding that makes him such a valuable voice in our industry. I really appreciate your time and joining us today, Kelly and Ramon. Okay. Without further ado, let's look at the background of the report, and our first session today is process. So we are going to be looking at process, people, and technology, the 3 Ps. Well, 2 Ps and a T, as I say. So a little bit about the methodology of how the report was constructed and put together. It's not the first rodeo for COPC. They've done this for a number of years. How many is it now, Kelly?
This is our 3rd year for New Zealand, but we do a lot of global research as well around the contact centre industry. But this is what's really special about this report is it just is focused on
That's fantastic,
what's happening in the New Zealand market.
That, isn't it? So Kelly and her team have put together a structured questionnaire that was sent out to lots of people who were invited through CCNNZ, Spark and COPC themselves. And that was all brought together and collated by the team and released towards the back end of last year, October, November time. Respondents included a huge amount of organisations across New Zealand, some fantastic names, and we'll go into those in one of the next slides. Here they are, or here's a few of them anyway. So, as you can see from reading on the page there, some really good organisations. This is not everybody who took part, but here we've got Dulux Group, Kiwi Bank, Winstone Wallboards, Rabobank, Woolworths. So we're looking at financial organisations, we're looking at people who are throughout all types of industries, retail, and even down to councils where we've got Auckland Council took part, which is fantastic. So let's have a look at the next slide. As I mentioned, I've covered retail and finance, but actually we've got education, healthcare and government services across there as well, along with banking. So the lot of thanks, Alice. A lot of industries covered there. 28% participation last year, one of the highest across the education, healthcare and government services, and 19% included organisations from customer electronics, technology solutions, automotive and utilities. Thank you. So we looked at them. We looked at organisations across the whole of New Zealand here. So you can see, yes, there was a majority of news in Auckland, but that's to be expected because of the demographics of the area. But 51% of people responded from Auckland, 29% from the Wellington area, and across the middle area of the North Island, we had 38%, and then just trying to add those numbers up. Do they actually work? 29% from Canterbury, and Otago and Southland bringing up 6%.
Yeah, sometimes they might have contact centres in multiple locations,
I wasn't going
so
mad
that's
then.
why it doesn't quite add up to 100%.
Well, not getting any worse, let's face it. So, well, one of the big things that everybody looked at this year, or we were really interested to find out about this year, was actually channels and how many people are interacting with their customer base across a number of these channels. So one of the questions was about how many people were offering only self-service technologies. And of course, nobody, fortunately, I think. That's my personal opinion, that we need humans involved, at least involved and probably running it. But as you can see, a lot of people, 26% of organisations across the New Zealand landscape are only human assisted. So they don't have a web chat, don't have a bot, don't have AI doing that. But 74% have got a mixture of both, which is pretty fantastic, really.
Yeah, we've seen that grow a lot. There are organisations out there that have dropped voice channels and only offer through digital, and we're seeing that increasing as well. We're seeing traditional channels like email drop off, but yes, which this next slide sort of talks nicely to. So we can see that we've got a 43% increase in chatbots, but it was actually 50% last year, so that's been a little bit of a drop. We've seen 50% decrease in the IVR, which is obviously a voice channel. So I thought that was really interesting because there's a lot of capability with AI within that voice channel to be able to resolve the interaction in the IVR, and so they don't have to fail over to an agent. So I thought that was quite interesting that there's been that drop in the IVR. We've also seen a 44% increase in web chat and 33% increase in social media, so that channel's climbing. The big one, though, is a 67% increase in using asynchronous chat, because obviously that's a little bit more in the moment. Customers can start and take a break and come back and continue the conversation, so a big increase in there. And another big increase was 82% in mobile apps. So there's a clear push towards that app channel, it appears. So Ramon, thoughts?
Yeah, there's always very interesting stats when we look at this one each year around these channel volume changes, and there's quite a few interesting things in there. I'm always interested in seeing that increase in email as a channel, because I think from a consumer point of view, it's a very popular channel, but from a business's point of view, it's quite a hard channel to manage. And a lot of companies that I work with, they're trying to move volumes from email to channels where they can be more responsive, like asynchronous messaging. But I think email remains as a popular channel because as a consumer, you can send an email and you can kind of forget about it for a little while until you get a response, possibly.
And I think with email, though, if that is still, sorry, Richard, it's still staying as a strong, as a customer preferred channel, we can do things like email to case. So it is dynamically creating a case within the CRM, whether it's from the email or through an online form. So that can speed up the process, which is important. And then we can use things like AI to also automate some of that workload, like read the content, read the title, and route that email. So that even though it's a traditional channel, between AI and capabilities with CRM tools, there's a lot we can do to automate that channel a lot better than we have in the past.
Yeah, it has evolved a lot, hasn't it? With smarts around using large language models and so on to understand what's going on in emails. But I'm really interested. I'd be interested to know more about processes like, for example, doing identification and verification of a customer in the email channel. I think that's quite difficult personally.
Can I just before we move on to the next slide, just to keep it accessible for folks like me, what's the difference between asynchronous messaging and a chatbot, for example, here? Can you talk us through that? Kelly, I'll throw it. Oh, yeah, sorry, Ramon. Yeah.
Between async and
we've
web
got
chat
chatbot on there and asynchronous messaging, yeah. So just to make sure.
So, yeah, and I was curious about that one as well, and what distinguishment the respondents would make to that one. So, to me, web chat is a synchronous channel, which means that if I'm communicating in that channel and I stop or the agent stops, then essentially the conversation will time out and end. And if you start again, it's treated as a new conversation. Whereas asynchronous messaging is a bit like if you're chatting to one of your friends in WhatsApp, for example, you might leave it and come back a day later and it's a continuation of the same conversation.
I've done that actually before. It helped me out a lot. Well, I was halfway through solving a problem with a printer in one of the printer companies, and I was chatting with them, I think through WhatsApp actually, as a channel, and exactly that happened. I could leave it a day, come straight back to it afterwards, and it would just carry on as it was before. It was really quite good actually. Mate, help me talk to them in my own terms.
Yeah, and from a customer experience perspective, asynchronous conversations like that, they could happen on a website as well. But from an organization's point of view, it allows them to be a lot more efficient in terms of how they do their staffing. Because potentially you could have an agent end their shift and another agent continue that conversation, whereas with a web chat, that's not possible.
So Kelly, let's have a chat about strategic objectives.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Yes, so I thought it was quite interesting. There's been a 9% jump in the top strategic objective being to improve CX. But what does it actually mean? One of the common things we see when we're working with our clients is, how are you defining what that actually means? What are the different elements that go into improving customer experience? And it's not just a silver bullet, unfortunately. There's lots of things that go into that. So we know, and it keeps on telling us all the data that issue resolution is the number one driver of customer satisfaction. So we know that hasn't changed. So that should be part of your CX strategy, is how do we increase issue resolution, whether it's first contact resolution or reduce the number of touches to resolution, which then also leads into looking at the entire service journey for that particular customer. It's, I crashed my car, there's the start of the service journey, and the car is fixed and paid for as the end of the service journey. Oftentimes we're looking, particularly in the contact centre space, we're looking at the individual transactions through our different channels as opposed to the whole being able to improve that service journey. So those are a couple of areas that I think that need to be looked at when it comes to
It's really interesting, because we used to
how
talk a
we
lot about
improve
first call
our
resolution,
CX.
didn't we? But I noticed your change in terminology there. Do you want to talk us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we still do talk about first contact resolution, but we know sometimes it's actually impossible to have first contact resolution. Sometimes the contact centre is the start of the chain and the process to, like, for example, an insurance claim. So really it's about, if we can resolve on first contact, fantastic, and we need to be looking at that and measuring it and looking at how we can improve that through training and knowledge and more efficient processes and better technology. But like I said, when it comes to issue resolution, is how many touches is it to resolve that issue? And when you do things like service journey blueprinting, which is what, again, we do a lot of that with our clients to really understand how many steps it's taking, where the barriers are. Are you making me print out a form and fill it out and sign it and then have to scan it back? It's that sort of stuff still happens. We don't like that very much. So the issue resolution is kind of the blanket term. So first contact resolution is absolutely very relevant, but we also want to look at issue resolution. Yeah. The second thing I thought was interesting here is improve agent performance and productivity, same as it was last year at 82%. So, but again, how do we do that? How do we make the agents more efficient, more productive? And we're seeing a lot with the introduction of self-service and it getting better, and the bots getting better, and AI getting better. It means that the interactions that are falling to the agents are more complex, longer average handle times oftentimes. So what are the tools that we're providing to the agents to enable them, because to resolve on first or contact, so making them more efficient. Being able to keep your average handle time where you want it to be without compromising quality, or without having agents rush customers or forget to tell them stuff, or all that lovely add value stuff. They're not doing it because they're targeted to an average handle time. So a lot of the tech, and obviously Ramon, you can talk a lot to this around things like agent, notes, automated notes, summaries, co-pilots. There's a lot there.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of the, that's I think the two sides to that automation journey is that, the conversations that are landing with humans are more important conversations that might take longer or more complex. And so like you said, Kelly, the training need on agents and even the type of agents you recruit is changing. And then the technology is also supporting it. So things like transcription, like you were saying, and summaries of conversations, but also, giving them checklists that automatically get checked off as they complete the parts of their process, and those sorts of things to make sure they complete as much as they can on that interaction.
And we're seeing too within that interaction, it's basically, AI and the agent working together. It's not AI taking that transaction fully away from the agent, but sometimes it's they're a team working through that interaction with the client or a customer, and the agent might do a bit, the AI might do a bit, might come back to the agent to confirm some stuff. So I think that's where we're seeing a lot of opportunity. So it's, working together, the AI and the agent.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm really interested
that's
with that
particularly where I'm seeing a lot
technology
of interest at the moment.
upgrade move this year. 55% of people was at 2025, and in 24 there was 68% of people that were looking at technology upgrades. Does that mean people have sort of stabilized, or are looking at soft skills to improve their CX? What do you think?
I was wondering about that one as well, and I was wondering if and I don't know the answer to this. Does it reflect? I think New Zealand's got is fairly advanced in terms of that transition from on-premise to cloud, for example, and so a lot of customers, organisations have shifted to modern cloud platforms with a lot of the features that they need to use, or are organisations watching the pace of change in the industry right now, which is huge from a technology
you're absolutely
point
right.
of view, and
That's a really good point. Lots of the vendors are out there telling us how quickly they're releasing new technologies, and lots are catching up, and perhaps their customers are sat waiting to see how the leaves fall or how it all works out. But really interesting. Maybe they're quite happy, and also I suppose over the last year, there hasn't been that much money flying around for technology upgrades, has there? So that could affect it. But then again, we look at the cost reduction below. We're also seeing that last year, the focus 41% was a big change from cost reduction targets in 2024. So that actually came down. So it was looking like a bit of a stable section for the technology side of things, wasn't it? Revenue generation.
Yeah, I think we have seen, I would say the majority of contact centres in New Zealand have made that transition through to CCaaS platforms. The traditional on-prem platforms, we had to put budget aside for upgrades that had to be physically done. These days they're evergreen. The new features just come. But I think contact centres and leadership need to be aware that there still needs to be annual budget for optimization of those platforms, because you've got all these incredible features coming, new stuff as well as current stuff. Lots of great things, and you need to be really prescribed in developing your feature deployment roadmap, building case studies around it, what you expect the ROI to be, what you want the outcomes to be for turning on that particular piece of that particular feature. And we're seeing a lot that we've seen in the last couple of years with AI, where it hasn't delivered quite what we expected. So I think, like I said, you need to be very prescribed around what you're going to deploy and why, and that's why your partners like Spark are very important to help guide you through that process, and COPC as well. That's what a lot of work we do with our clients.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kelly. And I completely agree with that, where you can't treat these modern CCaaS platforms like a piece of tin that's in a cupboard somewhere. You need to always be in investing and making sure you grow with those platforms, because they are evolving so quickly, and there's so much benefit to doing that. So
it really
it's a real key success factor.
I think with the experience that we've all had with AI over the last year or so, where we thought that it's going to cut down on the amount of people that we need, or we're going to need different skills. I think it's really highlighted that we actually do need different skills. You can drive AI fantastically well, but if you don't do it properly, you don't upskill your people, then you're actually not going to get the results that you expect from it. But if you get people together and they can put together fantastic scripts, then it can be amazing for you. So I agree. I think that people investment and skill investment is going to be huge over the next year. So looking at the challenges across the people that were interviewed or that responded to the survey, here's the big one. What are the biggest challenges from helping people deliver a better customer experience? Ramon, what would you like to talk about in this slide? Does anything particularly leap out to you? I know we've discussed a fair bit on the previous slide, but comments on this one?
This one was quite interesting as well, I think. So just comparing broadly 2025 versus 2024, it looks like the environment became less challenging. I'm not sure what you would say about that, Kelly. But just in terms of budget constraints,
I think the purse strings are opening up.
Lack of clear CX strategy as well. I think that was one that rated quite highly last year. In the challenges, resistance to change and so on. So I think that looks quite promising to me.
The one that stands out for me, obviously, is the budget constraint. So that's dropped. So that's good. Means the purse strings are opening up again, which is helpful. The one that stood out, though, was the lack of technical expertise. That's increased to 29%. So, why is that? Are we not investing in training of our people around these tools so that they can, do it themselves? Or have you made a strategic decision that actually we're going to work with our partners around this because we don't have the time or energy to keep people upskilling when these technologies are evolving so quickly? So that's, there's no right or wrong there. But yeah, like I say, with the evolution being so fast, it's hard enough for us to keep up with all the new stuff, let alone, your IT departments and things like that. So that's why I think it's really critical that you've got a very strong partnership with your suppliers and your partners, so that you're working as a team, particularly when you're oftentimes with the smaller contact centres. Larger ones, it's a lot easier to have those kinds of people in specific roles, but the smaller
Larger
contact
businesses,
centres often a
yeah.
challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, you get those in larger organisations where you can have people in more specialist roles, whereas in smaller organisations, it's another thing on top of the BAU roles that people tend to be playing. So it could be very difficult.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, move on to the
One of my
next
favourite bits,
section,
yeah.
which is measuring customer experience. So yes, 80% of people are conducting some kind of survey about their customer satisfaction and engagement. And there's different methods to do that, obviously. You've got a survey after an interaction, and that could be real time, like transferring the call to an IVR where we're surveying the customer, or they're getting an SMS pretty much straight away, or an email. But that is specifically to that one interaction, and understanding how satisfied were you with that. Then there's things like NPS surveys, which are more relationship surveys. Those might be for customers that have interacted with us or not. So that is just surveying the entire customer population. The thing about NPS is it's more of a macro measure. It's not, particularly in the contact centre space, it's not giving us sort of granular insights into why that was scored that way, because they may have interacted and gone into a retail store, or they may have purchased something online. And then we've got service journey surveys where we're actually surveying at the end of the journey, so when my car is fixed and the claim's been processed. So there's lots of different ways to survey, but I think it's not a one method is the right way. I think you need a combination so you can get a sort of a good view of how customers are feeling. One other important point is I always get asked how to measure first contact resolution. And the best way to measure first contact resolution is to survey customers and get their opinion on was the interaction resolved or not. That is the best way to measure first contact resolution. Just as an FYI.
Yeah.
Anyone else got any thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I just think it's really hard to capture with a survey, isn't it? Because often your survey's done at the end of the call, even if you've volunteered to hang on at the start of the call. Are you going to complete the survey at the end? Are you going to remember to hang on until the end? Sometimes I've been in those organisations. I thought, yes, I'm going to leave my feelings at the end because I've had a really good interaction with an agent, and I always think if I do, then I ought to play my part and say how good it was. And sometimes the technology's failed in the end. It doesn't let you transfer through, or the agent doesn't transfer you through. I think this is one of the big challenges. And perhaps if you get emailed after an interaction, you get asked questions. You go onto a website form and you're asked questions that you don't really want to answer. The questions that you wished they'd asked you can't answer. So I'm not a huge fan of fixed forms and the methods that we have now. So I think we're probably going to talk next time about how people actually capture information. I think this is going to be something that's going to change over the next year or two hugely. But perhaps, talk us through this. What do we feel?
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, yeah, Richard, like, I think we're already seeing a lot of that with, AI and analytics automatically generating a lot of, survey type information from the transcript and the recording to try and get, intent data and that sort of thing. And of course, it's not the same as asking customers directly questions, but you get some information about what they possibly thought of the
intent data
experience as well from that. So we're seeing a lot more of that happening.
Yeah, I think there's so much promise. There's so much promise with analytics. I'm really excited about it. I think obviously it's like you said, customer intent. Why are they contacting us? What can we eliminate and automate? Because I don't want to have to ring you, okay, or email you or contact you, because I just want the product or service to work. So I don't actually want to interact with you at all. But if I do, so I think the analytics is the really exciting bit, is around customer intent. Why are they interacting? Is it necessary or not? And then moving into assessing, obviously, agent performance through that interaction, which is sort of the QA side of things, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then measuring the customer satisfaction and assessing that using analytics, and then correlating that with our CSAT surveys. What the analytics is telling is very different to what we're getting out of our NPS survey or our CSAT survey. So I think that's exciting space for sure.
Yeah. One of the really powerful things is being able to identify those trends in the intents. So maybe something is happening, and can you proactively identify, what is the problem or issue that they're calling about, and go and resolve that, and prevent all of those future interactions from even needing to call you. That's a pretty fantastic customer experience when they don't need to call you because it's fixed.
Well, and a really great example of that was like one of the large insurance companies here. What they do is every day they look at the lowest customer sentiment scores, the bottom, I think, 10 and the top 10, and then they call those customers. And they actually make an outbound call and call them and say, look, I see that you had an interaction with us yesterday. It looks like you weren't very happy, and they try and nip it in the bud and resolve it. So I think that's a really interesting way to use
I think so. And I think
those sentiment scores.
That type of reaction or process actually really brings your customers closer, because they probably walked away from the first interaction thinking, I don't know, they don't care about me, I'm not important enough for them, I can't get what I want. But you ring them up, even if you're not able to give them what you want, they do feel heard. And if they feel heard, they feel valued. And I think that's probably a good thing. You can get over little issues with process and problems and product and stuff if you actually, we know it, we look after our customers. Yeah.
There's an old stat, I can't remember the numbers, but customers that have had a problem and it's been resolved to their satisfaction are more loyal than customers that have never had a problem. So every issue is actually an opportunity to create more loyal customers.
Well, and this goes back to a strange argument, or a strange, you mentioned it earlier, Kelly. I've heard a few people say, we just want the product to work, we just want the such and such to work. It's possible for organizations to inject a little bit of friction where a customer has to interact with them, but they get if they get a good feedback from that, or they get a good feeling from working with them, you've started to develop a relationship with that customer, and maybe they will continue to come back. It's fascinating. And I think this is where a lot of the people, the knowledge, the investment is probably going to go in over the next year, is understanding those full-on customer journeys. And marvelous, isn't it? Exciting times, actually. Is there anything else we want to go through on this slide, or shall we move on to the next one?
Very much so. No, I think we move on. Yeah.
Contact center metrics. Who's measuring and where and when?
What I find interesting about this slide is what people are measuring, but it may not necessarily be the right things. So, and we see this when we go and work with our clients. We dig a lot into the data. So we will go and maybe do a operations assessment and get some hypotheses together about what the issues are and the reasons behind it. But one of the key things we do is dive deep into the data to prove or disprove our theory. But abandonment rate, for example, 85% of people are measuring that, but only 78% of people are measuring service level. But abandonment rate, the result you get is an outcome of service level. It's an outcome metric. So if you're achieving your service level target, say it's 80-20, your abandonment rate should be sort of lower. But as soon as you're making people wait longer and your service levels drop, and you start to see your abandonment rate increase. So it's about understanding what are driver metrics and what are outcome metrics. And also importantly, it's really, you got to look at your KPIs and your targets and review them. Again, I'll come back to good old service level. Most organisations, most customers are willing and quite happy to wait between 1 and 2 minutes in queue. Yet we're busting a gut to try and achieve an 80-20 service level or even a 70-30, because if it's 70-30, it's answer between 0 and 30 seconds. But if customers are quite happy to wait a minute, there's a lot more staff you need on the floor or logged in to achieve 70-30 than you do 70-60. So I think that's an important thing about, looking at your KPIs, looking at your targets. Are they still fit for purpose? The other key one here too is on the right there. You see only 56% of you are measuring first contact resolution. But like I said earlier, we know that issue resolution is the number one driver of customer satisfaction. So there's a massive opportunity there for, you really need to measure that. It's critical.
That's why they're happy to wait those 2 minutes, right, Kelly? It's the expectation of having your issue resolved. So.
That's right. And because you've got all these other channels now and you've got lots of self-service options, for those that are calling, they may have, they know they need to speak to an agent. They actually want, because it's about my mortgage or it's something really important to me. So the higher value the interaction is to me as the customer, the more inclined I'm going to want to speak to a human rather than use a bot. So I'll wait, as long as it takes, because I want to speak to an agent.
What did we hear the other day? Somebody said something to me. It was about, I'm fighting my way through the bot. Was it something you said, Ramon?
Yeah, it was actually a client that I was working with, and he was saying, as a customer myself, just ringing my utility, I've got to fight my way through the bot or get through the bot before I can speak to a live agent. So he's figured out how he does that. It's just like in the olden days when we hit the IVR and we'd all just press 0, right? So customers are doing the same things to get through a bot and it's appearing as a barrier to them to get to, a live agent and who they want. So I think that points to the fact that we really need to be very clear about where we apply the bot or the AI, and applying resolution rates to it as well, and only enabling the bot to handle an interaction where we know it's going to achieve high resolution.
We need to move to outcomes-based reporting. Critical. I think that's it. That's what you're saying here. Absolutely. I think first call resolution isn't. It's important to measure because it drives the next measure of outcomes. How long did it take us to get those resolutions done? If it wasn't done in the first call, what was done in the second call, and what was the process and path for that? Okay.
Yeah, and the CSAT's the outcome, so the driver metric is issue or first contact resolution, and the output metric is your CSAT, because it's going to be like that. If it's high, that'll be high.
I see
if it's
there's
low,
a
that'll be
statistic
low.
on here about absenteeism, frontline absenteeism. So which of the following support metrics do you actively measure and report as a KPI? And this is the biggest one, isn't it, on the chart here, frontline absenteeism. So you're trying to work out whether your staff are in adherence or being off. That's what my takeaway is from there. Is that right?
this is one in previous reports as well, where there's been a growing trend of increased absenteeism. And is that something that you've seen again, Kelly, or has that flattened out?
There's another slide that we'll get to, which actually shows that we have frontline absenteeism is at 63%. No, this is what who's measuring. 63% of you are measuring frontline absenteeism. But the majority of agents do stick within their sort of 10 days leave. So they're not doing more leave, but it is unplanned. They're using it, but they're not doing a lot more, which is a good thing. So unplanned leave is an interesting. We saw during COVID it drop. We saw after COVID it increased. I think we're sort of seeing it come back and be a bit more balanced now.
More than a third of people are not measuring absenteeism. That sounds odd to me. Is that enough? Is it right? Maybe not. Well, it must be. Yeah.
Well, I would have thought it should be 100%, because if you don't have the bums and seats that you've forecasted for and done through your workforce management and saying we need 25 people logged in at 10 a.m, you need 25 people logged in at 10 a.m. So if you've got unplanned leave and it's down to 22, we're just not going to achieve service level for that.
Feels like
for that
a gap
interval.
to me.
It's black and white. It's numbers.
Key metrics. Human-assisted channels versus self-service technologies. Here we go. This should be a good conversation, Ramon. Quite a fan of this myself. But Net Promoter Score, human-assisted channels, 62%. And for SSTs, which is self-service technologies, 31%. So talk us through that. That's just the top stat. I'm just aware some people will be listening to this rather than watching the video. But let's talk through the top stat there.
Yeah, and I guess self-service technologies covers quite a broad range of things. It includes AI, but it doesn't necessarily just mean AI-related technologies. But I think one of the emerging things that we're seeing is organizations, in terms of a lot of their metrics, are treating virtual agents, for example, very much like a human agent, and thinking about it that way in terms of you recruit it, you train it, you measure the performance, you coach it, and so on. And so I think all of those metrics kind of play out and are very relevant to all of those. Net Promoter Score, I'm not sure what I think about that one, actually. Maybe I'll defer to you, Kelly, around NPS. Do you see that as a metric that's growing in general, the use of NPS, or I'm favouring customer
like I said, I sort of
satisfaction
see NPS as more of a macro score. It doesn't give us the granularity. Like I think CSAT, customer effort, is really a very valuable measure within the contact centre space, because it can get a bit more specific. Like, how hard was it for you to process the claim? Like, really hard? Oh, okay, so that type of claim for car was really difficult for this customer. That's giving us the information we want, versus would you recommend ABC insurance company for your car insurance, which is NPS. There's a big difference between what those two sets of data is telling us. So I'm a big fan of customer effort, but regardless of what you're using, you need to make sure you are applying it to both your human assisted and your self-service technologies, because most of us know when we're engaging with a bot or AI, but at the end of the day, we want to know how satisfied customers are through the channel that they chose to engage with, and to get resolution of their issue.
Yeah. Some of the things that we've found working with some of our customers around those automated technologies. So one of the focus areas that we've had in our bot practice at Spark is around good conversation design, and so conversation design principles, and taking that very seriously. And we've found from that we've been able to build some automated experiences that achieve really good satisfaction scores and a fairly low customer customer effort, and it all comes down to that design piece to do it. But you've got to be able to measure those separately from the human parts of the conversation to really understand it.
So key metrics. This slide talks about
Exactly.
AI. Which metrics do you track to measure the effectiveness of AI in contact centres? So it scales up to the very top, where people measure service level, standard I expect, escalation to live agent. That makes sense. How many times does your bot or your web chat need to escalate to a live agent? 38% of respondents said that they measure that, and they try and measure the AI adoption rate. So I'd like to talk about the adoption rate a little bit for us to have a chat about that. 25%. How do you perceive people are measuring that, and what is that rate about? And is 25% a good? The 25% of people who are responding are actually measuring that rate. Why do we want to know more about that particular one? Ramon, what do you think?
I'm actually a bit confused by what's meant by AI adoption rate. Is it of the organisation, or is it,
Well, I
are
would read
customers
it.
willing to use it?
Yeah, that's where I would go with it. Is we've offered it, so you're on the app or you're on the website or you're within your customer portal, and AI is an option for you to engage with. So, are you doing that? So I think that's definitely a good thing to measure. So when it's available, what percentage of people are taking it up, which then leads to, of those that take it up, how many escalate to a live agent. So, which is kind of like is it a fail, or is it? You got to sort of think the AI has reached its limit on what its capabilities are, so then it has to move to an agent. We want to look at their abandonment rate, so they're engaging with the AI and then they drop out and the issue doesn't seem to be resolved. And then again, the AI resolution rate, which is number 7 on the list, look, only all the way down here, only 19%. Again, it's I know I'm banging this drum, but it's pretty. Knowing of those that attempted, how many resolved, and for that engagement. So I think those are the sort of the key ones for me on the list here.
As a country we're measuring, as an industry we're measuring, if we're putting AI in there, how do we measure whether it's being effective or not if only 19% of people are actually looking at whether the AI was successful or not? It's kind of wacky, isn't it?
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I was really interested in that one when I saw it, because I was wondering what it meant, so does it reflect the way that organizations are using AI? So if you think of resolution as, resolving the customer's inquiry, and you're only using AI maybe as a concierge to improve routing, for example, it's not resolving the interaction. So, would you measure that? That's just a thought bubble for me about, why is that stat so low? I'm not sure, because I would be very interested in resolution
I think it's a
myself.
great point. I think that's a great point, because I do see AI as acting as a receptionist or concierge is a really great application. Getting the customer to the right, getting the customer to the right place on the website where they can find the information, like that. I think is a wonderful, that's a really great, and a really great first step into the world of AI too when it comes to that.
Yeah, as we see, more agentic AI become more mature, which it's doing, quite rapidly, we might be actually seeing more of those use cases where it's actually containing it and not needing to go to a human, because it's.
I think
resolving
we're still in the early
actual
days of AI as well, and
inquiry.
sometimes you do the action before you do the reporting, don't you? So it's possible that people in here, or people who've responded, perhaps don't know how to measure those things, which is a little bit of a gap in the market, but I feel it's incredibly important.
And it could be a good way to start, like I say, because if it's acting as a concierge, then you're going to get all the data about where the AI has sent the customer to, and that's your customer intent, right? Just like through the voice channel. So there's your data to try and identify, 30% of people that interact with the concierge want to just get a update on their claim. What's the status of their claim? Let's add that as the next journey that we're going to get to AI to be able to resolve.
Of claim or something,
so,
instead of routing through to a person to do it. Yeah, so we've seen a lot of changes in the last year. People trying to save money, organisations trying to save money, moving into outsourcing and offshoring. Let's have a look at the statistics that we got back from the report here. Kelly, perhaps you'd like to introduce this one.
Yeah, majority of the people that did participate in the survey have their contact centres onshore. And only 6% they have both onshore and offshore. But what this doesn't talk to, and I think, not sure if the next slide does, is actually of those that do, is it 100% offshore or 100% onshore? Or of those that are onshore, are there certain pieces of work that they're outsourcing? So it might be email management, or one of our clients, they use an outsourced partner to do all their web chat channel, for example, because it's, they can be 24/7. So, that's one of the questions here around onshore versus offshore, I think.
So inbound calls and outbound calls, 97% are managed actually onshore in people's own contact centres. Both equal numbers, and emails as well. That's really fascinating. But only 69% of back office processing is done onshore. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I say, sort of to that point is, and so you've got the different channels, so it's quite easy to carve off a channel and send that off to a partner. And then, but it's sometimes it's harder to carve off the type of interaction. Obviously, if it's by queue, if you're queuing general customer service versus complaints versus account inquiries. So 93% of complaints and product returns are handled onshore. That's a high value transaction. Versus, say, maybe debt recovery. That could be something that could be done. You got to be really. I'm a big believer on the onshore partnerships, because they, like I say, they sort of open things up as about 24/7 and time zones and that sort of thing. So you can find the right mix.
Geography matters quite a lot as well, doesn't it? And you can see those channels as we go down the channel managed graph on the left-hand side there, from inbound and outbound calls and emails at the top. We're working our way down through back office processing, social media and web chat, asynchronous messaging and video calls. And then we get down to about 14% for video calls. So it's just interesting to see most of the automated channels are quite easy to offshore, aren't they? If we've got 86% of video calls being run from offshore, then that's really quite something. Debt recovery, I'm a little surprised at that number. I thought debt recovery would be a little more sensitive and would be done in-house, but maybe those are sent to external agencies to look after.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting over the next year, looking at those transactions that get sent offshore, if those are going to be, the targets for in organisations for automating with AI, and what impact that's going to have on offshoring.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, that's a really good point, because with AI being able to handle these, these transactions, is there a need for them to go to offshore at all?
Yeah, if it's lower risk things, or more procedural, transactional type inquiries, they're all candidates for automation.
And that brings us to the end of our session 1. And now I think we will thank you for your time and move on and join us again for session 2. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.